Anna had always been the person who could convey confidence without having to raise her voice. In her early 30s, she worked as a financial analyst at one of the most respected firms in Berlin, known for her surgical punctuality, her sober demeanor, and her almost mathematical precision in dealing with crises. She was the woman who could dominate boardrooms with a nod and solve problems without fuss. Anyone who saw her like this, with her hair tied up elegantly and her eyes attentive behind, discreet wire-framed glasses would never have guessed what was going on behind that meticulously organized routine. Her marriage to Hans was seen as a picture of stability. 7 years together, a well-decorated house, dinners on the weekends, and even a Persian cat that complete the picture. But the apparent perfection hid a slow, subtle, and silent deterioration, a collapse that began within and that no one, not even her, could name. 6 months before everything fell apart, the first signs appeared like a subtle haze, memory lapses, unusual fatigue, and an invisible weight that followed her from the moment she woke up until she collapsed into bed. Anna attributed it to overwork, the natural overload of her job, or her age. But as the weeks went by, the symptoms intensified. Meetings that she had previously mastered with ease began to require redoubled effort. Numbers began to jumble, and she began to forget important details. Her mind were shutting down in small blocks. A strange, discomfort set in. Her dreams began to change, becoming vivid, disturbing, full of disconnected fragments. And curiously, the most intense episodes always came after the evening tea that Hans, with almost programmed kindness, served every day before bed. The tea always came in the same mug, white, with lavender designs and a slightly chipped bottom. Hans would prepare it punctually, always between 9:15 and 9:30 p.m., and would hand it over with that discreet, almost rehearsed smile, saying that it would help her relax. Anna saw no reason to be suspicious. It was a simple gesture, even affectionate, and after so much time together, she didn't question small things like that. What intrigued her was the way she would fall asleep deeply right after drinking it. An almost anesthetic sleep, without transitions, without any memory of having gone to bed. And even stranger was waking up with a hangover sensation. Her mind had been completely switched off during the night. In the early days, this went unnoticed. But as the lapses became more frequent and the dreams more disturbing, her intuition began to whisper something she didn't want to hear. It was during a casual coffee with Clara, an old college friend and pharmacist, that the doubt finally took shape. During a conversation about fatigue and insomnia, Anna mentioned the tea and her symptoms. Clara, who had a sharp gaze and a direct way of speaking, immediately frowned. She asked what the tea was made of, who prepared it, and if Anna had ever observed how it was prepared. When she realized she didn't know how to answer, Clara's expression became more serious. She commented, with the care of someone who knows the weight of what she is saying, that certain long-acting sedatives can be dissolved in hot liquids without altering the flavor much. She also said that, in rare cases, abusive partners use this resource to keep the other person confused, vulnerable, and emotionally dependent. Anna laughed nervously. It were something out of a movie. But that night, as she held the steaming mug, something inside her hesitated, and that was when everything began to change. That night, for the first time in weeks, Anna didn't drink her tea. She waited for Hans to leave the room so she could brush her teeth, then poured the contents into the sink and rinsed the mug so carefully that it seemed like a ritual. After brushing her teeth for the second time, she went back to bed and pretended that everything was normal. She turned off the light, lay down on her side, and controlled her breathing. She were rehearsing a role. The silence of the house, which had previously given her comfort, seemed too heavy that night. The walls were about to reveal secrets. She pretended to sleep. She lay still, her eyes closed, listening to the sound of her own heartbeat, which now echoed through the mattress. And it was in this state of tension that she heard Hans's soft footsteps returning to the room. But he didn't lie down next to her like he usually did. Anna could feel his footsteps moving closer to the dresser, and then she heard the muffled click of her laptop opening, which didn't make sense, since she usually kept it turned off in her bag. Anna remained still, controlling the fear that threatened to spread through her limbs like an electric current. The sound of the keyboard filled the room, interspersed with the gliding of the mouse. Hans typed, accessed files, made copies of personal documents. At one point, she heard the printer in the office start working and had to fight the urge to get up. At that moment, she understood that something much bigger than she had imagined was happening. This wasn't just a paranoid hunch. It was a trap, and she had been inside it for months, maybe years, without realizing it. The next morning, Anna woke up before Hans and acted nothing had happened. She made coffee, answered work messages, and left for the office with an almost theatrical ease. But inside, she felt like a piece about to break. The whole day dragged on between the need to keep up appearances and the effort to mentally organize everything she had seen, or rather, heard, the night before. On the way home, she stopped at Clara's pharmacy. The two talked in low voices in the parking lot. They were sharing a dangerous secret. It didn't take Clara long to conclude that there was indeed a good chance that Anna was being sedated. The hypothesis seemed absurd at first glance, but it fit perfectly. With her symptoms, extreme drowsiness, mental confusion, disjointed dreams, fatigue upon waking. Determined not to fall again, Anna began to repeat the act every night. For a week, she pretended to drink tea, lay down and waited in the dark. And night after night, Hans repeated the same behavior. He accessed her files, copied information, made calculated movements, following a script. One of these early mornings, she got up discreetly after he left the room and went to the office. In the IT printer's trash, she found documents that she didn't remember signing. A loan authorization from the bank in her name, a transfer of funds, and a power of attorney with a fake signature that imitated hers with frightening precision. There was no longer any doubt. He was preparing to assume her financial identity and empty her accounts. And more than that, he was willing to do it with her still inside the same house. Anna knew that any misstep could be dangerous. Hans still didn't suspect that. She was aware, and that was her only advantage. She spent the next few days trying to maintain normality, while inside she was a boiling volcano. At work, she avoided distractions, but she could no longer pretend that everything was fine. She started backing up all her documents on a flash drive hidden in the lining of an old purse. She emptied bank accounts in small amounts and transferred them to a new account in her name, opened at another bank, with a different email address and a different phone number. It was during this period that she decided to seek legal help and arranged a discreet meeting with Friedrich, a lawyer recommended by Clara, who had already dealt with similar cases of marital manipulation. What shook her the most was hearing from him that this type of crime, slow, silent, psychological, was more common than one might think. Friedrich was blunt. Anna needed to leave the house before confronting Hans. Any rash action could trigger a violent reaction, even from someone who had, until then, seemed peaceful. Hans's gentleness, she was beginning to realize, was a mask, a meticulous performance built on dependence, control, and manipulation. Over the next few days, Anna planned her exit like someone planning an escape from war. She sorted out documents and important personal items, and with Clara's help, found a temporary place to hide. Deep down, there was still a part of her that refused to believe it. How could someone who had slept next to her for years, who knew her traumas, her dreams, her routine, be capable of engineering such a cold and calculated betrayal? The answer always came in the same image, the false, shaky but effective signature of her own name on the paper that almost erased her identity. The night before her escape, Anna had trouble sleeping, even without tea. Her body felt constantly on alert. Her senses were heightened to extremes. Every sound in the house seemed amplified. The ticking of the clock, the creaking of the hardwood floor, the purring of the cat in the kitchen. She spent hours staring at the ceiling, mentally rehearsing every move she would make the next day. Everything was ready. Documents sorted, accounts blocked, new passwords created. Clara would pick her up at 6:30 in the morning before Hans woke up. But that last night, something unexpected happened. Hans didn't bring her tea. Instead, he showed up in her room with a glass of wine and said he wanted to talk. Anna felt a chill run down her spine. Something inside her had suddenly changed. Or worse, he knew. But he didn't mention anything directly. He talked about work, about his desire to travel, about how distant they were. His eyes, however, didn't follow his tone of voice. They seemed restless, probing Anna's reaction, seeking some confirmation. Her heart racing, she did her best to keep her face neutral. She knew that any false gesture could make him realize that the game was close to over. After that strange conversation, he lay down next to her, closer than usual, and watched her in the darkness. Anna pretended to be asleep, but inside she felt adrenaline running wild. That night, she didn't close her eyes for a minute. At the slightest sign of noise, she would get up and run away. She was ready, even if she wasn't. The next morning, the alarm clock rang as usual at 6 a.m., but Anna was already dressed and had her backpack packed. The sky was still dark when she walked down the stairs in silence, with light steps. Avoiding the creaking steps, her heart was beating fast. She knew that this was a decisive crossing. Clara was waiting for her outside, with the engine running and a worried look on her face. When Anna got into the car, holding her documents against her chest, she didn't say a word. But the tears began to flow silently. Her body were releasing all the tension that had accumulated over months. No words were spoken on that journey, only a respectful, complicit, painfully liberating silence. She didn't look back. She knew that if she did, something inside her would hesitate. And hesitating at that moment would mean losing everything. Hours later, from a safe place, Anna began to carry out the final steps of her plan. She called the bank, froze all her accounts, blocked cards, and reported suspicious transactions. Then, with Friedrich's help, she filed a formal complaint for fraud and attempted identity theft. The documents she had collected in the previous week served as compelling. Evidence: forged contracts, unusual bank transactions, copies of her forged signature. Hans, according to preliminary investigations, had already transferred small amounts to an account in the name of another woman, a co-worker with whom he had a parallel relationship. The plan was clear: to empty Anna's financial life and disappear with his lover to Spain. But now, everything had been interrupted. For the first time in months, she breathed without fear. The final confrontation took place over the phone 3 days later. Friedrich suggested that she not confront him directly, but Anna felt she needed to hear his voice, needed to say loud and clear that she knew everything. She called from a restricted number, and Hans answered with a confused, sleepy voice. "Hans, I know everything. About the tea, the documents, the plan with your colleague. I even know about the account in Spain," he said with a calmness she herself did not recognize. On the other end, there was absolute silence. When he finally answered, his voice trembled. He denied it, tried to evade it, demanded explanations he were the victim. But Anna did not give in. She said she did not want to hear any more excuses, that he had crossed every possible line, and that now she would be alone, in peace, without fear, without blackmail, without nighttime sedatives. After that, she hung up, and she cried, not out of sadness, but out of liberation. The days that followed were confusing, painful, and at the same time strangely light. Anna did not return to her apartment. She rented a small studio in the Prenzlauer Berg neighborhood, simple, sunny, with light furniture and a balcony with pots of basil. The change of environment was like breathing through another nostril. Reality had taken on new colors. Little by little, she returned to work, with the support of the company, which had been understanding when it learned of what had happened. She received a promotion a few months later, the result not only of professional recognition, but of the strength with which she had faced everything. Anna went back to drawing, something she had not done since her adolescence, and began to rediscover the pleasures of being alone, walking alone, traveling without plans, laughing in cafes with real people, without secrets hidden in cups of tea. The reconnection with her own life was a silent but powerful process. There was no great moment of epiphany, nor a scene worthy of a movie where everything magically resolved itself. What there were mornings when Anna woke up without feeling the fog in her head. Afternoons when she was able to finish reports with clarity, without forgetting what she had done minutes before. Nights when she slept without having to pretend. It was these small victories that gave her the certainty that she was rebuilding her own existence, not as a forced reconstruction, but as a new foundation, more solid, more hers, without outside interference. She started attending. Pottery classes on Saturdays, something she had previously thought was silly, but which proved to be therapeutic. The clay molded by her hands trembled at first, but gradually became firmer, just like her. Clara continued to be an important pillar in this process. Their friendship grew stronger in a way that rarely happens after the age of 30. There was no judgment, just mutual support and true complicity. On a rainy October afternoon, sitting in a cafe that smelled of cinnamon and freshly, "Baked bread," Clara said. "You've got color back." And it was true. Anna was more alive. Not in the obvious sense, but in the sense that you feel someone's presence in your own body. She had been numb for so long by the tea, the lies, the relationship, that she had forgotten what it was like to feel things in their fullest form. That phrase echoed in her head for days, and it was then that she understood, for the first time, that surviving was just the beginning. Really living was what came next. The legal proceedings continued. Hans tried to claim confusion, misunderstanding, and even emotional imbalance on Anna's part. But the documents, records, screenshots, and testimonies spoke for themselves. Within a few weeks, a protective order was granted, preventing any contact from him. Anna followed everything with the serenity of someone who no longer depended on the outcome to move forward. The trial itself was just a formal record of what she had already overcome within herself. Friedrich. Took care of the legal procedures while she got back to her body and her routine. For the first time in a long time, she slept without her shoulders locking up or waking up in the middle of the night with her heart racing. The past still appeared in flashes, but it no longer dominated her. It was just the past, and that was enough. Months later, as she was leaving a bookstore where she had bought a book about urban gardens, Anna saw Hans for the first time since her escape. He was on the opposite sidewalk, thinner, with a lost look in his eyes, his clothes wrinkled, like a faded version of the man who had once lived in her home. For a second, their eyes met. Hans opened his mouth to say something, but Anna just kept walking. She didn't speed up. She didn't hesitate. She just kept going. There was no more room for that chapter in her story. No word said there would change what had already been resolved inside her. And in that silence, she felt something she hadn't expected. Pity. But it was a distant, clean pity, devoid of longing or resentment. Freedom, she understood, sometimes manifests itself in the simple act of not responding. Over time, Anna began to talk about her experience in small support groups for women who had been victims of psychological violence. At first, she was hesitant. The idea of exposing what she had experienced still made her feel uncomfortable, not because of shame, but because of disbelief. It was strange to say out loud that she had been manipulated in her own home by someone who claimed to love her. But as she heard other stories, she realized that her case, although particular, was not isolated. There were many Annas out there, with different names, different addresses, but with the same feeling of having been gradually erased. And sharing her journey became part of the healing process. She learned that verbalizing what had previously been stifled gave a name to the pain, and naming it is the first step to emptying it. Her sa'iya. Self-esteem, previously based on efficiency and control, was now anchored in something deeper: the awareness of her limits, the courage to break cycles, and the kindness with which she began to treat herself. Anna allowed herself to make mistakes, to rest, to say no, without guilt. She began to choose her companions more carefully, including at work. She was no longer the woman who accepted everything to maintain the appearance of stability, and because of this, her presence became even. Stronger, only now rooted in truth. She rediscovered old hobbies, traveled alone to the Italian countryside, took photos without thinking about the perfect pose. Little by little, she built a new life, with fewer filters and more presence. Not because she wanted to forget what she had been through, but because she had learned that survival is different from existence, and she wanted finally to exist fully. There was a moment, months later, when Anna found the old lavender mug at the bottom of a drawer, the same one Hans used to serve tea in. For a few seconds, she stared at it in silence, waiting for it to say something. Then she placed it on the sink and washed it with hot water, ending an ancient ritual. She didn't throw it away. She kept it in a box with other mementos of her life, not out of attachment, but out of respect for the woman she was, the one who survived without knowing she was fighting, the one who pretended to sleep while she was being betrayed, who planned every step in silence, who resisted while everything around her said it was her problem. It was necessary to remember, because forgetting would be allowing it to be repeated silently in other houses, in other beds, with other women.